What's up, everybody? This is Steve from GENX Horror, and I'd like to try something a little different today. You know, Gen X is anyone born between 1965 and 1980, and man, I'll claim 81, 82. I'll claim some 83s up in there too. But that's a lot of years. I mean, we're pretty old at this point. And taking that into account, I'd like to take on every single year and pick a few of what could be the best of various types of movies. So whether it's horror or suspense or thriller, creature features to zombies, all throughout our generation. And we're going to start today. So keep an eye out for these year in review videos in between our regular itch-scratching nostalgic dives into VHS and horror classics we've all grown to love. But today we're talking about giant teenagers terrorizing towns, possessed skulls, driving people insane, and lesbian bikers wreaking havoc across the desert. I've piqued my own interest with that last one, admittedly. You know, 1965 was pretty great when it comes to out-of-the-box creativity and trying new things. It was the perfect storm of creativity and chaos. The old studio system was crumbling, censorship was loosening up a bit, and independent filmmakers were discovering they could make movies about literally anything, as long as they had enough fake blood and a decent scream queen. So buckle up, because we're taking a ride through the 10 most unhinged films that made 1965 the year that proved cinema could be absolutely bonkers. And we loved every minute of it. Now I got that song in my head, loving every minute of it. Anyway, 1965, the Earth Dies Screaming. And we're starting with what might be the most metal movie title in cinematic history. The Earth Dies Screaming sounds like a Black Sabbath album. Rest in peace, Ozzy. Damn. But it's actually a British sci-fi horror film about robot invaders who show up after everyone on Earth mysteriously dies. And that's a pretty wild plot. The script follows a small group of survivors who wake up to find everyone else dead, only to discover that alien robots are now hunting them down with the help of reanimated corpses. It's kind of like a wild cross between like Night of the Living Dead and maybe the day the Earth stood still. There's a lot of deads in there. The film was shot in just over a week on a minimal working budget, which actually works in its favor because the empty, desolate landscapes feel genuinely apocalyptic and give all the right vibes that you need for this. Director Terrence Fisher brings his gothic sensibility to what could have been just another cheap alien invasion flick. The result is this eerie, Hammer horror-like atmospheric piece that feels way more substantial than its 62-minute runtime. Plus, those robot designs are genuinely creepy. They look like they wandered off the set of a much more expensive movie. Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. Now, here's where things get a little British and twisted. It's Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, and it's an anthology film that follows 5 men on a train who get their fortunes told by the mysterious doctor. And each tarot card reading reveals a different horror story, and spoiler alert, none of them end well. We get everything from a disembodied hand seeking revenge, shout out to the beast with 5 fingers, to a jazz musician whose music literally drives people insane, and here's the thing, some jazz will. The vampire segment features a young Donald Sutherland who's looking absolutely terrified, and honestly makes the whole thing worth watching. Christopher Lee, as usual, shows up as one of the passengers because no British horror film in the 60s was complete without Christopher Lee. What makes this one special is how it manages to pack 5 complete stories into 98 minutes without any of them feeling rushed. Each segment has its own distinct flavor of dread, from gothic body horror to psychological terror.
This is just the beginning of the wildest, weirdest adventure you've ever seen. Now, anything goes. And everything grows.
Guys, teenagers in bikinis growing 30 feet tall and terrorizing a small town. That's Village of the Giants for you. And it's exactly as gloriously ridiculous as it sounds. This plot revolves around a group of delinquent teens who accidentally consume a growth serum and become giants, then decide to take over the town because, honestly, what else are you going to do when you're suddenly the size of a building? Ron Howard shows up as the kid genius who created the serum, proving that even Opie couldn't escape the weird cinema of the 60s. The film features extended dance sequences with giant teenagers, which is somehow both the most absurd and most memorable part of this whole experience. Burt Gordon was basically the king of giant monster movies back then, and he brings that same bigger is definitely better energy to what's essentially a beach party movie with a science fiction twist. The special effects are charmingly rough. I mean, you could practically see the matte lines around the giant teenagers, but that just adds to the film's goofy charm. It's the kind of movie that makes you wonder what they were putting in the water at American International Pictures. Remember, it's 1965. Some of us were busy being born, and our parents were getting down with beach party movies with giant teenagers. Apparently. Thankfully.
What was that?
Boris Karloff returns to remind us why he's the undisputed king of horror, this time in an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space, or Die Monster Die. Die Monster Die follows a young man who visits his girlfriend's family estate only to discover that everyone in the area is either dead, dying, or mutated beyond recognition. Maybe to some of us, that's just your typical weekend with the in-laws. The film centers around a meteorite that's been corrupting everything it touches, turning the local landscape into a wasteland and the family into something considerably less human. Karloff plays the patriarch who's been secretly studying the meteorite's effects because cosmic horror is 100% the kind of thing you want to investigate personally yourself rather than, say, calling the government and moving to another continent altogether. What sets this apart from other 60s horror films is its commitment to that Lovecraftian dread, that sense that there are forces in the universe so alien and terrible that just encountering them drives you completely insane. The greenhouse scenes where we see the meteorite's effects on just plant life are genuinely unsettling, and it's Karloff's last great horror performance, and he brings this weary, tired soul to a character that's essentially watching his entire world decay around him. And it works, man.
Pick a name? Any name. I saw what you did, and I know who you are.
This one might actually sound familiar. I Saw What You Did. Now, leave it to William Castle, the master of gimmicky horror, to take the simple concept of prank phone calls and turn it into a genuinely suspenseful thriller. I Saw What You Did follows two teenage girls who decide to make random calls and whisper, "I saw what you did," to strangers, because for sure this was entertainment before the internet, and everyone watching this video did something wildly similar, right? Or worse. The problem is one of the calls reaches a man who has actually just murdered his wife, and he thinks the girls are witnesses to his crime, and what starts as harmless fun quickly becomes a deadly game of cat and mouse. Joan Crawford shows up as a suspicious neighbor, bringing her trademark intensity to what could have been just another teen in peril kind of movie. I really love this premise overall. Castle was famous for his theatrical gimmicks, but this one works purely on suspense and atmosphere. The film taps into that one very real fear of technology being used against us, and the idea that our modern conveniences can become weapons in the wrong hands. These two gals. It's basically a proto-slasher that predates Black Christmas by almost a decade, proving that Castle was always ahead of the curve when it comes to understanding what scared the hell out of us.
Wild women, wild whales, race the fastest pussycats, and they'll beat you to death.
Hang on, everybody. Now, we have the film that basically invented the concept of the action heroine while simultaneously giving Middle America a much-needed collective heart attack and middle finger. And it's Russ Meyer's Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. This one follows three go-go dancers who race cars, murder people, and generally terrorize the California desert while wearing outfits that would make a burlesque dancer blush. Man, God bless Russ Meyer. And side note, did we have an 80s era Russ Meyer? I can't recall one. We needed one. This plot involves the gals kidnapping a young couple and then targeting a wheelchair-bound old man who supposedly has a fortune hidden somewhere on his property. But honestly, the plot is just an excuse for Myers to showcase his three curvy lead actresses, Tora Satana, Haji, and Lori Williams, as they kick ass and take names across the desert landscape. These women don't need men to rescue them. They're too busy being more dangerous than any man in this movie. Myers shot this thing in just over 3 weeks with a budget that wouldn't cover mobile Wi-Fi in a modern film today. But every frame looks like a perfectly composed piece of pop art. Stills from this movie are incredibly gorgeous. The dialogue is pure pulp poetry with lines like, "I'm of legal age for whiskey, voting, and loving," that sound like they were written by someone who learned English from comic books and film noir.
Tried to kill me! She tried to kill me! She tried to kill me!
The Nanny takes everything you think you know about Bette Davis and flips it completely on its head. This psychological thriller casts Davis as a seemingly devoted nanny who may or may not be slowly poisoning the children in her care, and none of them are JoJo Siwa. It's whatever happened to baby Jane applied to a much more intimate, claustrophobic story. The film follows 10-year-old Joey, who's convinced that his nanny is responsible for his sister's death and is now targeting him. The problem is Joey has a history of being an ass, so nobody really believes him when he starts making accusations. Davis brings this unsettling maternal energy to the role. She's nurturing and terrifying, which is exactly the kind of performance that made her a legend. Director Seth Holt creates this atmosphere of domestic paranoia where every cup of tea becomes a potential weapon and every bedtime story sounds like a threat. It's psychological terror at its most effective, proving that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who claim to love us.
The moving skull spreads its freaking terror everywhere.
Now, the skull takes the concept of cursed objects and runs with it like a marathon runner who's just discovered amphetamines. We follow a collector of occult artifacts who becomes obsessed with acquiring the skull of the Marquis de Sade, because some people never learn that when something is cursed, you're better off leaving it alone. Peter Cushing, again, can't get him out of a movie in the 60s, plays the collector who ignores every possible warning sign, including the fact that the skull's previous owner went completely insane and died under mysterious circumstances. The skull itself becomes a character, exerting this weird influence that slowly corrupts everyone around it. The Victorian atmosphere and Christopher Lee show up to deliver ominous warnings that just nobody listens to. What makes this one special is how director Freddie Francis builds tension through pure visual storytelling. There are entire sequences where the skull's influence is conveyed through color, lighting, and just camera movement rather than dialogue. It's Hammer horror by way of surrealist cinema and atmosphere, and it's absolutely mesmerizing. It's a beautiful film.
One small, simple proof.
Proof of what?
That Bunny Lake exists.
Hey gang, this one actually sounds familiar. I think someone was mentioning this one in the comments a few videos ago, and maybe this isn't it. Otto Preminger made a thriller about every parent's worst nightmare. Your child disappears, and nobody believes the child ever existed in the first place. Bunny Lake is Missing follows Ann Lake, who drops her daughter off at school only to discover that there's no record of the child ever being enrolled, and suddenly everyone's questioning whether Bunny Lake existed at all. The film becomes this psychological maze where reality itself becomes unreliable. Is Anne delusional? Are we watching a mother's breakdown or a genuine mystery? Laurence Olivier shows up as the detective trying to sort through the confusion, and even he starts questioning what's real. What likely sets this one apart from other thrillers is how it uses the swinging London setting to create this sense of dislocation and confusion. Everything looks modern and sophisticated, but there's something unsettling lurking beneath the surface throughout this whole film.
David Stillwell. Double L, double L? That's right. Tell me, how many more of these questions do I have to answer? Just a couple. But you don't even know what my complaint is yet. And it's killing me.
This is a great one, and this is, I was going to say it's 1965's Mirage, but these are all 1965, man. Mirage is what happens when someone takes film noir and gives it a serious case of amnesia. Gregory Peck plays a man who wakes up on a skyscraper during a power outage with absolutely no memory of how he got there, why people are trying to kill him, or even who he actually is. It's kind of like the Bourne Identity, but with less physiological enhancing pills and more overall dread and just hopelessness. The film follows Peck as he tries to piece together his identity while being pursued by mysterious assassins who for sure know more about him than he does. Diane Baker shows up as a woman who claims to love him, but he has no memory of ever even meeting her. The whole thing unfolds like a wild dream set in mid-60s Manhattan, with every revelation raising more questions than it even answered. The film has this paranoid thriller energy to what could have been just another amnesia story, but it's much more. The film taps into those very real fears about identity and memory that I know I myself am struggling with right this very second. Now that's 1965, and those are just some highlights from that year. We discovered these likely years later on TV when we were just old enough to know we shouldn't be watching some of these at all. From giant teenagers to cursed skulls, from lesbian bikers to paranoid thrillers, this was the year that proved filmmakers were willing to explore absolutely any idea, as long as it might sell tickets and traumatize some audiences. Now let me tell you this, gang, what did I miss? What deserves recognition? What do you recall from this, the earliest of our years? Throw them in the comments. There's a load, I'm sure, that deserve props. There's a load that I went through as well. Next week or so, we're diving into 1966, and let me tell you, if you thought this year was weird, just wait until you see what they came up with next. And until then, keep watching the weird stuff because, somebody has to appreciate the movies that practically raised all of us. Until then, man, love you. Stay cool.